This is another episode of So You Think You Can Doc. That's Allan Jhagroo, your host, nephrologist. My co-host today, Dr. Antar, is not going to be here because medicine is real. And in real life, you have to do things like see your daughter's Christmas concert. And that's where he is right now. Now, more importantly today, we have Dr. Mariah Quinn with us, who has, I'm going to say, a very unique path in that, well, I guess it's becoming more common, right? Mm-hmm. But I think you were cool before it was cool to be cool.
Oh.
Okay. And what I mean by that is going along the lines of some of the emotional intelligence or other career paths, including leadership, administration, that you've walked into. And, you know, we really want to just kind of take a step backwards and let people know that there are other ways to be a physician and live your life. But before we jump straight into any of that, we need to kind of, you know, take a few steps back. Say, who are you, right?
Yeah. It's a big question.
Yeah. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So if you don't know, that's a town of, I think now it's about 65,000 people. So it's got a decent sized university branch there and such. So I grew up there, went to Catholic school for the first 5 years of my education, then public school for the rest of the way through.
When was that transition about?
The Catholic to public school transition? It was after fourth grade. And the reason for the transition was that my parents had grown up in cities where the private school education seemed superior to the public school education. And that was not the case, especially in math and science, where I grew up. And so that was the genesis of the move between the two.
It's an interesting point. So, I grew up in New York City, and that was definitely the case, that there was this clear private versus public.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple of public schools that you had to test and get into that were a little different from the other private schools, but it was definitely different. And I've seen that since I've come here to Wisconsin, where when we were first looking for like which school district,
where do you want to move to?
They all look good to me compared to what I was looking at anyway. So I hear that, and now my kids here, they're in public school. One is now UW, and the other one's still in high school. But the curriculum and what they offer, it's I don't, they were in private school as well, and that was more of a COVID switch situation.
Right, so they could stay in in-person school.
Right,
and
exactly.
Have all the things.
And then when that resolved, we pulled them back out because I just felt like it was too small. That some of the schools had classes of 20 people in the grade in high school. And
I know, small.
They could only offer core classes because are you going to have a teacher to teach one kid, right?
Right, totally.
So it sounds like that was some of what you were looking at in that situation, or at least your parents were influencing it that way.
Yeah, and I think that was a good move in a whole different lot of ways.
So your parents obviously had, well, I guess every parent has some input or insight into what they think would be the best education situation. Are they in medicine?
Nope. I am the first doctor in my family. I do have some dentists in my family. My younger sister's a veterinarian, but I'm the first physician in my family. My dad is an engineer who then went on to high levels of administrative leadership in the engineering firm he works for. He's now retired. And so when I was growing up, he was like, it's amazing. He remembered his calculus and pre-calculus and stuff.
Boy.
Having tried to help my daughter with math in her pre-calc class.
My son's daughter right now.
No chance.
I don't even try anymore.
No.
Once we got past the whole rise over run, and I'm done.
Totally. Yeah. So that actually, I'm very impressed by that now. But he's a very interesting guy. He went to Marquette High School in Milwaukee and was like a high school athlete, academic underachiever, and his mom was just like, you go do something with your life. And he was like, I'll show you. And he graduated in 4 years with a civil engineering degree from here and went on. So he the rebellious streak, is somewhat strong in my family, I would say. So reverse psychology tends to work very well. Certain family members, myself maybe included a little.
It's incredibly shocking to see what people can accomplish when they decide to apply themselves.
Absolutely.
We all know all of these people, right? These brilliant people who are just, and
then they find their thing and they just laser focus. They do it.
Yeah. So, and it's becoming, I think, more so that way, right? Because we have these phones that have all this information and AI and this and the others. I think your work ethic is more important than how smart you are and what you can remember, right? We've got all these other things to contribute. So it might be a different kind of playing field.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah. Well, and I think, and in fairness to him, he was a college athlete too. I mean, he's a competitor who can really put the work in, when he's decided to do it. So that's really part of
different kind of work.
Different kind of work. But I worry a little bit for our kids that the competition is so fierce around things and achievement. The bar is set so high for them. I worry that someone who has really achieved with my dad's path would really struggle to get into many colleges these days.
There's no way I would have gotten into the schools that I went now. And I look at, my son is he's afraid he's going to get his first B. And I'd like to say none of that matters. Just do your best.
Right.
Just I'm but the average GPA acceptance to the local state school is a 3.9.
Right. Granted, we have a spectacular local state school. So.
Right.
But yes, very true.
It's just,
yeah.
Yeah. And he's going into business, which is their best school, to make it even worse.
Yes,
right?
Totally.
So, it's a different world. Yeah. All right. So they had some insight into, okay, well, this might be, they probably were thinking about you and where you would fit best, which size of the pond and all, all those other good things that come up. And now you're in public school. Handled it okay? Change?
Yeah. So, it was facilitated probably by the fact that the city I grew up in really was my neighbors that I knew all went to the public school that I went to. So I already had relations. So relationships are so important at any age, but maybe particularly in that late elementary school through high school phase. And so I had a lot of those friendships going into public school, which was super helpful.
So public school in Eau Claire is how many people in a class? Do you remember approximately?
Yeah, I think there were about 400 or 450 people in my graduating class. It was a decent sized school versus where my older daughter's graduating. My younger daughter will go Middleton High, which is even bigger. But
it's biggest in the state right now.
Yeah.
So my daughter just graduated.
Yeah.
I'm very in tune with those numbers. Yeah, it's good and it's bad.
There's competition for limited resources, but also a whole more options, like you were alluding to.
Yeah.
More class options.
And, unfortunately, everything is always about budget cuts and this and that and the other. And there's less and less, even though the schools, whatever, as big as it is, you'll get the same as any smaller school, right? Which makes you wonder, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? Yeah. All right. So you go into the public school. I'm going to call it a zoo just because it's bigger, and I assume things worked out well for you.
Yeah. I mean, I was starting in about freshman year, I was pretty academically focused. It wasn't like I didn't care before that. It's funny. So my first semester of high school, when my report card came out, my dad said something like, "Don't worry about getting all A's." And for some reason, I took that as a challenge that I was going to do that.
I wonder if he knew that.
No,
he's let me just.
That's what I'm like.
Her.
I'll have to ask him that next week when I see him after Christmas. But yeah, it turned out fine as a strategy. Which I think their overall strategy was that they didn't actually apply pressure. Any pressure they applied was that kind of pressure, which was you're going to figure this out kind of on your own. And for me, I think that was the right kind of pressure. And, some strategy I've generally taken with my own kids too. They're going to pressure themselves enough. So I'm not going to add to it. It might be shaped or nudged very slightly, but it's, going to be their own steam.
Yeah, it's tough. Like you said, your freshman year and you're already okay, well, what if you didn't have that response quite yet, right?
Yeah.
Or, you get, I don't know, baited into anything that can derail you pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's easy to fall off. So was it kind of smooth through the years, or how did that go?
So high school for me was, the normal academic stuff that I think many of us do, like the AP classes and all language classes and all that stuff. But my real passion, and actually where I thought I was going with my life, was to be a dancer. So I did ballet dancing and ballroom dancing, and I actually thought that's what I was going to do when I grew up, which is a very different thing, obviously, than what I do now.
What do you think kind of brought you into that in the first place? Did you have some exposure or some?
Yeah. So before I started doing that, and I started doing that at a late age for someone who was interested in dance, I started at age 12, which is very late for someone who's really into that. And before that, I had been a competitive swimmer, which was what my dad was. And I think this is another sort of, there's a moment of rebellion there, but also I got sick of going back and forth across the pool, to be honest. It just wasn't interesting to me. I didn't like it. And this psychologically, I think this is sort of interesting. As I became less interested in it, I put in less effort and other people started to beat me, whereas I'd been super competitive when I was younger. And I didn't like getting beat, but I also didn't really want to put in the effort. So like, that's not a good combination.
Some of it's that, you have talent, but then if you don't nurture
If you don't
that
apply
talent,
yourself,
then,
right. So then a classmate of mine came in. It was like one of those school show and tell kind of things. She's like, these are my point shoes and this is what I do. And for some reason that just grabbed me. And so I started taking dance classes, and I think the link for me between that and being a physician is like the need for self-expression and for people to be seen and to like understand emotion, which is like really critical to good performing arts. So there is like a little bit of a connection.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for chronic injury, et cetera, maybe I would have gone that way. But
and that's kind of where I was going with in that. Yeah. Did you see like, hey, I don't have to do this stroke exactly this way in this line. I know there's wiggle room here. Of course, if you're trying to do something exactly right, that's a different story. But
perfectionism has a role there too, for sure.
Right. Yeah. But there's this, I guess, a little more freedom or wiggle room for expression.
Ballet as a dance form is highly exacting and very unforgiving in terms of deviation from standard. But what exists within it is what differentiates really good from less good performers is something that's harder to put your hands around. And it has to do both with the quality of movement, but also with the way that they show what's happening inside to the outside world. And that it was super interesting to me, like being able to embody different characters or express different emotions. And like, I just love that.
So we're going to call it the X factor, because I think that X factor is going to come back around here.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Two people doing exactly the same thing and yet conveying two completely different
one grabs
messages,
you and the other you're like, okay, that's nice.
I mean, there's grab you and then there's, I don't know, grab you, and then the other one evokes a different emotion. In other words, makes you run away, right? Or something like that.
If it really goes
something
right,
opposite, but yet doing the same
Yeah.
thing. It's interesting how, well, number one, people can perceive that, and number two, other people can, express that.
And I think that can happen in the work we do too, right? Around things like communication, et cetera.
Yeah. If you look at, we were talking about this earlier, you just look at the AI transcript, you can have the exact same words, and we could have two different reactions
Very
from the same
different
person.
meaning.
So when you were in this or getting into this, maybe you I'm sure you weren't like, hey, I think I'm a really, empathetic person, so therefore this is better. No, but you look back at it, you analyze it, and you maybe, okay, this is
right. You can see the river when you look backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself kind of, I guess, getting into this teaching, helping role? Or were you like, I'm in dance and I'm competitive to be the best that I am?
I think it's tricky because I think we are ourselves, and we also exist in relationship to what's around us and the environment that we're in. So I got very lucky in that I had this wonderful instructor who was so good at having these really helpful, it was like mentoring relationship, just to use a term that we'd be more familiar with, sort of like mentoring relationships with students, and really saw each one and was very thoughtful about them. And so it was very easy to feel nurtured as an individual by that person. And I think part of that, plus maybe just the rest of my environment, made me feel this keen sense of responsibility for the kids that were coming up behind me. So I always felt really drawn to the notion that we'd do these big shows every year that, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or whatever it was, because it was a children's ballet. Yeah. But this sense that as someone who had the opportunity to be out in front a lot, that I had a lot of responsibility for helping those kids who were coming up. And so I think there was part of that just kind of falling into a helping, mentoring, setting a tone of psychological safety and belonging for the other kids around me that I sort of fell into, perhaps. So it's a value, but I don't know that I could have articulated that at the time. You know what I mean? It's just that was how I felt comfortable living. And when I saw people not doing that, it just really rubbed me the wrong way.
Interesting. Because there are other people at your, grade level or whatever it was, or ability, who were not doing that, not seeing that, right? Not perceiving that. And okay, so you had this innate, I should be helping these people, this should happen. But you also had a negative reaction to the other people.
That's
right?
true, to the counter behavior.
So you were holding people to your standard.
Yeah.
But you weren't necessarily there in the, I guess, the mindset of, I'm just going to be best and better than everyone.
No, I mean, I wanted that to some degree, but that wasn't, just doing that alone wasn't really as meaningful as.
Right. Well, helping those younger people was not going to help you become the best of the best, right? I mean, so you were doing it, right, for some other reason. Yeah, I mean, it's I always find it interesting to like go, when you look back and force people to analyze themselves, whether you have already or not. Well, right. And of course, this is loaded because, I know who you are.
Right. It's funny though, like, if you look, I am sure that you could also look back in your life and see times where you didn't live up to your standard at the time or your subsequent standard, or where you learned something about yourself that you didn't know, like a place where you were actually experiencing some judgment that like, and then when that was pointed out to you, you're like, well, that's not the person I want to be or who I am or whatever. Like, I think we all have times as we're developing, and I'm sure if we're paying attention, we continue to have them throughout our lives where we like butt up against the edges of what we stand for, and we have to like make decisions. And then because living by who you think you ought to be and want to be is like a better path.
Yeah, and I think it's a really key point, right? We all have way too many regrets, or maybe we don't perceive them as regrets, and maybe we're better off that way. And this is an important point of this whole podcast, is that I want people to see, I'm going to call it failure or not success or whatever it is, because I think in this TikTok, Instagram world where people are just perceiving constant perfection, they're not seeing the struggles.
The curated existence, which is only the finished product, not all the stuff along with the way.
And I've had people on who've told their stories about how, they've applied to medical school 3 times before they got it. That's what I want people to hear and understand, not just the, it was so easy, and I knew this all along, and this is who I wanted to be, and therefore I did it, and nobody could stop me because blah, blah, blah. Like, who cares?
Not interesting. Right? And not really true, probably, either. So.
And this is part of, even as we started doing these podcasts, initially I was like, okay, and I'm going to get, this big name, and this person, this, that, and the other, and then and who's going to relate to this? Right? And then I started moving away from that, and I was like, hey, I'm going to talk to this resident who's having a hard time, and this medical student who's interested in something other people aren't interested in, and this, that, and the other. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because you have an atypical path. And it's actually a path, well, I don't know, path itself, but closer to the end of the path, it's almost something that's screened against, right? When we think about becoming a physician and the hurdles that you jump.
Yeah, what do you mean screened against?
Well, because there's no test that helps you, because you're an empathetic person, or you look at wellness, like that doesn't help you. If anything, it might hurt you potentially, right? From the screening process, because like while you were helping other people and people were helping themselves, they may have been scoring better than you and getting ahead of you. Right. And that's what I meant by kind of screening against.
Yeah, it's not incentivized, kind of a clear
and
way.
That might change. But
I think that's a good point, because like you alluded to earlier, there are more people like me now who have this path. And so there's more examples of people in this space who are making careers out of it, like whether it's academic, research type of career or leadership roles.
Yeah. And that's what I meant by you were cool before cool was cool, right? Because now everybody's like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to do that, because that's the thing.
It's a thing you can do. There is like there's a thing.
But there was a time where you were making decisions when it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take you, let's go backwards again.
Yeah.
So we're still in high school.
We're still in high school.
We're still in high school, and we're dancing.
We're dancing. Yep.
And we're feeling good about that, except for the people who aren't helping the other dancers, right? And yeah, so were you already going science?
So I didn't know that for sure, but I was just like driven to do that in school. So, like,
it was the hardest thing to do. So you do it,
sort
right?
of. So I like, if there's something harder I can do, I think that's about right. Because really I sort of had this dream of going out and like being a professional dancer, and sort of imagined.
That's okay. I was
like,
going to play football. So.
Yeah, there we go. I don't have a build for dance. I don't know. Really. So I think ultimately, what ultimately happened is with dance, and actually now I would love to go back as an adult who's been kind of away from it for a long time and dip back into it, because I had to get away from the point where I had expectation about achievement and attainment of any kind of perfection. Now I'm like almost 50 practically, and like the body's not going to do it. So now I feel like I could re-enter it in a space of acceptance and joy, and just be like, this is what I love about this, and not worry about, is it good enough? So what happened is, really, I don't have the right build for a ballet dancer. I just don't.
And I wasn't big enough for football.
There we go. But we had illusions of grandeur and dreams that were dreams. And so I had some injuries. I was not sort of like progressing by external landmarks. Like I would go to these summer programs and I wasn't really progressing as fast as some of the other kids, which of course drives me nuts. And this was unlike swimming. I was putting in the work. And I wasn't making progress. And that really did finally lead me to like, I had like horrible hip flexor tendonitis, and I kind of thank God I quit eventually. I would have really damaged my hips. But eventually I was like, this isn't going to work out for me, because
What grade was this?
this was like in my junior and senior year. That was like kind of when I came to that. So then I decided like, all right, I will apply for college. I'm not going to like try to go and get into some like conservatory or take that kind of pathway. Gone some auditions for things and they hadn't worked out. So there definitely was failure along the way to kind of, refiguring where I was going. And so I was like, all right, I'll go to college. And at that time, this is like serendipity. At that time, the medical scholars program existed at UW, which was this like program where you didn't have to take the MCAT. You would get admitted to the med school when you got admitted as an undergrad. And so I applied for that program and I had really good science grades and whatever. So I got accepted.
My cousin went to one of my co-host actually did one of those programs too.
Yeah. So I got accepted to that. And to be honest, I went in and I was not sure that I was going into medicine. I actually had no idea what it was about. Like I said, I'm the first doctor in my science. Yeah. Well, it was like science, but also people and art. So like my impression of it, which turned out to be kind of prescient actually, was like, that's a way to be really interested in science and learn how things work and apply that, but also to understand like humanity and art and like weave those things together into a meaningful career. So like, happily, I stumbled into that. And it was really because this program existed, I think, that I stumbled into that. Because then I got like the mentorship around how to do the pre-med stuff, but I could do other things. And I took dance classes, but focused on science.
Incredibly insightful or lucky, right? One of the two.
Or a mixture, right? Like some insight, but a lot of luck.
I have a family full of doctors. I did not perceive any of that. Right? My wife grew up with no doctors in her family, and she's an emergency physician now, and she didn't really perceive what the job was either, but here you are and you figured it out at what age? Like in high school.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
Again, it could have been
really
lucky or whatever, recognizing that this is not just math and whatever, just science. That you actually have to deal with people, understand people to people. Likely that's the future of medicine. It's a whole nother discussion anyway. But you were also enduring, or like, I guess before that joy or success, I assume to be one of the biggest letdowns in your life, right? Having to let go of something that you liked, you chose, you tried.
But then had to be like, this is not, it's interesting, like being like 30 years away from that point in my life now. I don't remember how, I think, as I look back on it, it was kind of one of those like grieving processes where I slowly let go and shifted focus, so that it kind of happened there wasn't like a defining moment where I was like, this is over. It was kind of like, it became clear. You know what I mean? Over time, I was like, I wish, but this is not gonna,
Were you like jabbing, like, oh, maybe I feel a little bit better now. I'll try again.
Yeah, and then I'd enter something else. And then, that sort of thing. So, yes, but it was disappointing for sure. Yeah. So I came here for college. I went to UW for college.
And you're coming in on this joint, well, not joint, but you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to take the MCAT, you're going to continue towards, it's a medical school pathway, right? Yeah. Like, so at that point, you're kind of already choosing that. Yeah. I don't think it's like like you need to maintain your grades or whatever, kind of thing.
Yep. Some bars. Yeah.
Right. What major were you pursuing?
So weirdly, ultimately, I was a chemistry major.
So was I.
Guess what? I don't remember any of.
Me neither.
Like I can draw like boat and chair hexane, but like that's pretty much it. But I loved it actually. Like I loved how I chose it because I ended up really liking like my, like big freshman the professors were really interesting and amazing. And there was just something about the way it all worked that just like my brain, like I actually really loved math too. Like it worked for my brain. I really liked it. Yeah, so it felt good to think about it.
What you're saying is kind of what I tell my kids, and I think is really the key. I loved organic chemistry.
Me too.
And it was because you didn't have to, you got to memorize all this stuff. Like, I didn't memorize anything. If you understood the way the poles for electric, you're good. Like you'll figure it out. And sometimes you can figure it out two different ways if you wanted to.
Right.
Okay, that's really nerdy. All right. But I spent like summers tutoring people, making money. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
like
super
for me.
Fun.
Now, full disclosure, I went to nerd high school where I had 2 to 3 hours of chemistry per day. We had majors in high school. so I was like deep. You know, if I wasn't going to play football.
I'll really show them I'll study chemistry.
At that point, I still thought I was. So I don't know what I was really doing there.
Well, it sounds like you were living the same slightly split existence I was of like deep academics, but also like the thing you love. I think that balance is important.
Yeah. So you're here, you're in chemistry, which isn't, it's okay, but it's not the pre-med thing, right? It's like its own thing. Like you could go be a chemist, which is what I did initially, but you know, so you could go that route, right? And like, it's not the easiest route,
right?
Well, unless I guess you understand it, then it is easier.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like, you know, of course, the other, you know, the biology education here was amazing. Like, you know, BioCore series. Actually, like, it's funny now because several folks who work here were in my BioCore classes and
right?
such. Yeah, chemistry classes.
1,000 people. How would you know, right?
It's so fun to like have those like funny connections come back. But then I do think like the sort of balanced humanities education that was sort of forced upon me as an undergrad probably did keep me grounded. And also, I think in some way, I had decided I was going to med school, even though I didn't know I had decided. I just kept going in that direction. But when I look back at some of the more transformative, like undergrad classes that I had, they actually weren't in my major. So like there was a women's studies class I took about race, class, and gender, which at the time I like did really ultimately change my mind about the way I understood people's experiences.
But you were checking boxes when you took it.
I was checking a box. Yeah. And actually I recall being like a little disgruntled about some components of it, which now I'm super embarrassed to admit.
I'm like, why did I take Buddhism and Taoism? Now I'm like, I'm so glad I took women's studies, but I was checking a box. But I was one of the two guys in the room.
I wish I could go back and like apologize to my poor teaching assistant because like I think I was annoying, but like for reasons. Anyway, it was a really transformative class to hang on sort of that hard science, kind of going back to that like humanism and science thing that really fuels good medicine. And then like the integrated liberal studies classes were amazing too. And just like exposure to great teachers. I mean, that I think is like always a theme. Like, the people that you have a chance to be touched by over the course of your career are really the people that lead you down the path that you're going to follow, whether you totally follow them or whether they just change your thinking about something. I think I'm going to
add a little to that, right? Like you have the same people sometimes in the same class. There's the same potential mentor influence, this, that, and the other, and they're just not open to it, right?
Right.
And they miss those opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that I've heard a lot of because obviously I've been doing this and talking to people is that there's always, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's not a parent, sometimes it's like coworkers, whatever. I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah. Someone becomes important influence and helps you feel like you can see yourself. If it's the path you follow, if you see yourself in that path, that really helps a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't, you know, be influenced if you're not open to being.
True.
So, okay. It sounds like, you've run into some, we'll call them mentors too, that maybe were not purposely chosen, but they end up like influencing you. So you're doing chemistry, but you're kind of like, okay, checking boxes, including pre-med boxes, because obviously you're in the, this pre-med path from day one, directly or indirectly. In the back of your mind, I'm sure there's like, do I really want to do this? And I could, because you don't have to do it, right? Was there a time or something that kind of really solidified or drove you?
Yeah, I think so. So I had a few experiences that I sort of like set up extracurricularly for myself that had to do with shadowing. I spent one summer working with the director of our county public health department and got a sense of like what public health was about, prepared presentations for him, and like went around and shadowed public health nurses, like, going out into Amish communities to vaccinate kids, and like got a sense about that like seeing into other people's lives and then seeing people working their roles and how that connected to people was really powerful for me.
How did you get this job? Was this just like, I'm trying to get a job?
I think my parents knew him. I don't remember. Such a nice man. So, and I had like a little desk in his office and like worked in there. I have this weird
feeling that your parents are like puppet masters.
Yeah, secretly. They might be. Yeah, I don't know.
They're like, you don't need to get A's.
No.
I was like, you might want to meet this person.
Yeah, I don't remember how that worked. And I actually don't think it was a paid position. I think it was like an unpaid summer, probably almost observer internship kind of thing, but that was helpful. And then the other two things that were really important was I shadowed two different physicians. One was an OBGYN. And I actually thought when I went to medical school, that's what I thought I was going to do.
Me too.
Really?
Well, it didn't last very long. I got thrown out of enough rooms that I was like, yeah, this is not for me. Well, it's the whole mixture thing, right? Because you have this outpatient clinic, you do surgery, you deal with a fairly young population. There's, they get better, right? There's like
There's a lot of
healing, there's joy. Yeah. Of course, that's, the medical school perception of things.
Right.
Right. But you're inpatient, you're outpatient, you're in the OR. It was just
you like that whole mixture.
Yeah, that whole mixture was pretty appealing. There's like micro, but you're doing primary care, long-term relations. There's everything. Everything's going on here. And I thought it was really pretty cool. And
unlike you, I was like not really interested in the surgical part. So I thought it was women's health and delivering babies, which of course from the TV version of that, you don't know that while that's like a really joyful thing, it's also one of the most terrifying things and one of the most traumatic things when it doesn't go right. So in med school, when I finally realized it was really surgical and there's myomectomies, and I had some counter good mentorship experiences, I would say, as a med student in the OBGYN space. So I decided I didn't want to do that. But I did shadow an OBGYN in her outpatient practice and then followed her for a couple of deliveries. She had like a wonderful connection with her patients. And so it kind of reinforced that sort of like dual stream of sort of like science and art of medicine. And then the other person I shadowed was a physician in my hometown who was one of the first internists to take care of patients with HIV/AIDS in our city, who felt sort of comfortable and confident doing that. And I remember seeing a patient with him who was a woman who was legally blind, who had some really complicated stuff going on. And they had enough relational, sort of status together. What's the word? Social. There was enough like social capital between them over their longitudinal relationship that he could ask her about really difficult things. And I saw some of that play out in an appointment. I was like, like, that's what's magic about this. Like, we have a lot to offer people, but this is how this works. And so I think those three experiences, both the kind of public health experience, which was kind of like, let me see the lay of the land and understand sort of people's backgrounds in a different way. And then those kind of like one-on-one experiences that I saw those doctors having with their patients was really, really impactful. I think solidified that was the path I was going to follow and really eliminated questions. Like I didn't actually think about doing anything else. So
so a lot of people forced or could elect to have experiences like that. They don't react like that.
Maybe not. Yeah. And I've had shadowing experiences later that that did not grab me in that way. So maybe it was openness because I wasn't stressed. I was like, maybe that was part of it. But yeah, they were really impactful.
So did you perceive other people or peers? I don't know, it might be hard to directly compare this. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like, did you notice that you seem to have an advantage in insight into people or populations and what they were going through, empathy,
I don't
that
know.
other people were not?
I don't know. I don't really think so, to be honest. Like,
so you weren't getting like mad at the other girls in ballet here, right?
No. So like, I mean, undergrad is such an interesting time, right? Like the people that you get to know, and like science classes are fun as an undergrad, not always fun. Like they're hard, they're a lot of work. But the fun part of science classes is you actually you're forced to work in teams, like in lab settings and things like that. And it's fun to work in teams, and like, you've got this common goal, and a lot of these folks are high achievers. And like, so there wasn't that, I never really had that feeling. Like people generally, sometimes people pull their weight a little less than other people or whatever, but
yeah, no,
it was different.
I hear you, and not everybody likes to work in teams. I do too, right?
I mean, with limits, I suppose, Yeah.
But what I meant is more along the lines of, did you see other people who see the same, indigent population or whatever it is, and they're kind of like, ew, or separate themselves, or, but you're responding differently because you're responding with this empathy or understanding or desire to help, right? The same way the kids in ballet you wanted to help, and other people didn't respond that way. I'm just curious to see whether or not you noticed it.
I don't think I noticed it as an undergrad. I think, and med school is a very hard time to notice that because in med school we're all being evaluated all the time, which is one of the really hard, stressful things about being a medical student. And even someone who's not feeling those things usually does a pretty good job of putting it on. So I did end up actually taking the MCAT. So what happened, I'll just tell you a little jump ahead. So in my last year of college, I started, actually like right after I graduated, I started dating my husband, who had majored in film and television. He was a communications major here. It wasn't going to be practical for him to stay here. So I actually rescinded my admission, like after I graduated. Bridge burned, probably,
yeah.
but I didn't know. I was just making the decision. I don't know. It was probably a horrible thing to do. Probably someone holds a grudge over that. But anyway, so I gave up my admission, took a year off between undergrad because it was sort of clear we were supposed to have a relationship. And so it was either he was going to move along and I was going to stay here, or I was going to take a break and figure it out and take an MCAT and do all that. So we decided that I would apply to med schools in New York City only. So we ended up, I got into med school at Cornell. And so we ended up living in New York City for the next 4 years after that year off.
Cornell's Ithaca.
Yeah, the university is with the med schools in
That's
New York
right,
City.
right. Okay, the Burn Center and everything.
Which is
else.
always
That's right.
like a
That's
little
right.
weird to explain to people. So so we spent the next 4 years living on the Upper East Side. So med schools are a really interesting experience for me because you went to a private high school, it sounds like, where like maybe it was by application. No, but it was science.
It was public, but it was one of, there was 3 of them in New York, and you had to test.
Which one did you go to?
Brooklyn Tech.
Brooklyn Tech. Okay.
Yeah.
So like in where we ultimately lived before we moved here, Boston, there were some, the by application schools like Boston Latin and stuff too. So like, my public school experience, and then to a lesser degree college, there was always that experience of like, there's like, you're like the pointy type A a little bit, like you really care about getting things right and things like that. So it was an interesting experience then going to med school and being like, well, I'm like, they're all pointy A. Like, these are my people. Like, I'm not weird here. And also it was like actually wonderful to move away for a while, because when you move to a new place, you get to decide who you are. That's and true. What people see. So actually it was really powerful at that point in my life, I think, to move away from the place that I'd been.
This is interesting, right? So, I mean, perception is what matters, I guess, right? But, you move out there, you get to hit a reset button. I can be whoever, but you're going into med school and you're perceiving it as like, these are my people, and these are all pointed, and they're all ultra competitive, and this, that, and the other, and it's Cornell. They're naturally within med school by itself is already, right? But then most people were having imposter syndrome, and they were scared, and can I compete? Can I be in this situation? Am I going to be the worst person here? Yeah. And you're like, these are my people.
Yeah. I'll tell you what imposter syndrome later. So I did have a little bit of that actually. So, like going from our wonderful state university here to to a land grant yet private institution with a ton of kids from Ivy League colleges and from the East Coast, et cetera. That was the part where I didn't feel like these are my people. I felt like these were my people in terms of like a lot of shared values. They don't think I'm weird because I try hard. Like, all that was the case. But like, definitely there was that, there's that academic hierarchy that exists. And I was sort of hyper aware of that. And I have a Wisconsin accent, and I would get made fun of for the way I say bag, which I still can't say correctly, no matter even for
academic hierarchy, and then the regional hierarchy.
Yes.
Right.
And so like I was from a state school from flyover land. And so I did actually feel some of that, like, how do I fit in that regard, but was able to sort of like navigate that. It would like pop up at times. It wasn't until residency where imposter syndrome hit me super hard. But so you had asked me about that, like, willingness to help other people. And I would say, like, actually, I felt in general quite lucky with the people that I ended up with. Like, there were people that I had more or less in common with. There was one thing that happened, which I never knew who this was, but after our anatomy class, which I found to be a really moving experience, actually, the whole cadaver
I was moving
lab.
too. I was moving away.
It was repellent in some ways, but I remember, sorry, I'm totally digressing. This is like completely not anything you asked me about. But
this is the way this podcast goes.
Yeah.
As it should be.
So, we had our cadaver lab. We had these wonderful faculties. The lead faculty member had been a surgeon. Stomina Matui was his name. Where he moved from, I can't remember, but he had moved to the U.S. and basically couldn't do the retraining to become a surgeon, so he became an anatomy professor. And he was an amazing, inspirational teacher. And then we had these prosectors, this Australian woman and this Sikh gentleman, and they were amazing. And and we had our 4 people around a cadaver that we worked in this very formaldehyde smelling lab, which was not pleasant. But I remember that this cadaver, who had been an elderly woman, as we sort of worked through things, she'd had a hysterectomy, she had a feeding tube, but her hands looked very much like my grandmother's hands. And that was, to me, that was actually very moving, the responsibility that exists around being a good steward of that gift and sort of appreciating that human. So afterwards we had this service for this experience. And one of my classmates, in some maybe it was a reply all email or something like that, was like, these people who think this is important, they're just brown nosing or whatever, like basically saying that wasn't real. This is so interesting. That did rub me the wrong way a little bit. But whatever, they were having some experience, which is interesting.
But because you're set up to fail. I mean, fail emotionally, right? Because you have a bunch of people who are ultra competitive, then you're on a curve, and you're supposed to help each other out.
Right.
No, why would I do that? And then somebody's, accusing brown nosing.
Yeah,
right?
I know. It's like you can't freaking win.
You look back at that person, and at the time, I'm sure whatever you felt, you're like, I see why they felt that way. Because probably they were like, they're just trying to get ahead of me.
Probably. I always wonder who they were. Mostly because I'm like sort of worried about them. Like, are they okay? Have they gone on to have a meaningful career? Because that's a reaction. That's a reaction.
Public reaction.
Right. Yeah. Not that doctors never do that. So anyway, but no, I mean, I actually think that beyond there being competition, I don't know that I was very actively comparing myself to other people, which I think is why I'm sort of struggling to answer your question. Like, I think over time I did get feedback like, man, you got some key information from that patient, or like later when I was an intern, like an attending saying, I don't have to go back and tell the patients the plan nearly as much when you're on my service, or things like that, where like it reinforced that maybe I was doing something right or something a little different. But I wasn't like looking at my colleagues and thinking like, but you clearly don't care, or I am doing this in some way better than you, because I was just focused on doing it in the way that I thought I should do it.
And also, you get into survival mode, right?
Yeah. You're
do you think you were, you're going through your questions with the patient, right? Mm-hmm. This is medical school. I guess what I'm getting at is, do you think you were did you recognize that, hey, I'm trying to like find a bond with this person so I can elicit information better consciously, or was it just do that?
I think, no, that wasn't the motivation. It happens that you get better information if you do that. But I think my goal was I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them to feel safe.
Because you want them to feel comfortable, you want them to feel safe. Mm-hmm. That's like wanting something for someone else. And I'm going to kind of just re-angle that. Is that, would you have been comfortable if they weren't comfortable? Or was this like, were you looking for comfort for yourself is what I'm getting at? Mm. And you wouldn't have been comfortable unless they were.
Maybe.
I know I'm kind of saying the same thing in two ways.
So I think there's a few different ways of thinking about that question. In a personality sense, like, personality test kind of way, I'm an introvert. I like one-on-one interactions with people. I don't like large groups of people. Even one-on-one interactions, right? I can put on the extrovert thing, but I tend to linger along in one-on-one conversations rather than like flit around. So like, if you observe me, you'll notice that when I round. Well, I spend more time one-on-one than
I met you, not actually one-to-one.
Yeah.
Because again, you were cool before it was cool. And this was, I don't know, almost 15 years ago. It couldn't have been 15, but obviously it was close to 15.
13 years.
But it was probably close to when you first got here, and we had a retreat, and, you had us all close our eyes and go through some kind of form of meditation and this, that, and the other. And I was just thinking, people kind of talk about this stuff at this point, right?
Yeah.
But this person has got to be so confident and brave to like actually come in here, because you didn't know any of us. You were hosting the retreat. You may have met Aji or something, whatever.
Yeah.
And Ajay, I love you, but I'm just saying he's not like the person you were like, oh, wow, that guy is so touchy-feely that he'll fully embrace this. So if that's your exposure and you came in, wow, this person like really is confident in what they're doing. And it's totally working, meaning we all felt it, not in like a, hey, let's snicker and laugh,
Because that could be the reaction for sure.
That could have been the reaction, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's how here you are walking into this big group of people from all whatever. And so when I hear that you're an introvert, this is really like surprising to me and interesting.
That's funny. Yeah. We can come back to that, that presentational thing. But I do think that because I'm an introvert, in my current life, I wouldn't frame myself as shy. But in former parts of my life, I would have. Like high school, college, like if I knew people, but it was very hard for me to like put myself out there and get to know people. So I think having a career that allowed me to have helping relationships with people fulfilled this important need, because I could functionally have meaningful relationships with people without needing to worry about being shy, because I had something to offer them. So I do think that, so there's part of it where medicine probably served a relational need for me too. Like that's probably true. So I think that therefore I did feel very strongly about wanting the other person to feel comfortable. The danger of that is that you could want to make them happy or have them like you without, and so therefore not have appropriate boundaries or not have difficult conversations, which is a whole other thing that you then develop a skill set around and actually can be really meaningful and actually becomes really interesting and fun if you do it right.
Yeah, I see the warning, and at the same time, that's the strength, right?
Right.
Like you can have the difficult conversations in a meaningful way because
of the relational capital that you've built. Right. But so, I think almost everything about us can be a strength and a weakness at the same time. But so to your point about you wouldn't have pegged me as an introvert, I think when I'm really passionate about something, I will throw myself into it. I will show up to do it. And I actually think the dance background probably helps a little bit too, because then over time I've become more and more comfortable, just being in front of an audience and being like, I'm going to do this thing. And so I think those things kind of converged. And also when you're doing work you really, really care about. So the content of the retreat, which had to do about your division's well-being, when you really care about something, a lot of other things fall away, right? If everyone had snickered at me, that would have been kind of painful and would have really stunk. But most people are generally relatively polite. Maybe it's the Midwest thing, right? But so you just show up and you just, I don't know. It's one place where I feel like I probably had some courage at a time where it was not cool yet.
Yeah, and just to quickly, I just want to highlight it more so people understand that this is, I was the shyest kid in high school and this, and it really wasn't until I was here as faculty and forced to give all these medical school lectures, the flooding of it, I didn't care about presentations anymore. And then I started to demonstrate and do weird things where I'd act like patients randomly and not even introduce myself. Yeah. And, now I'm recording this pod, clearly not a introvert, characteristic, right?
Do you ever think about it's the concept, resilience is kind of a bad word in physician wellness and healthcare worker wellness these days, and to some degree. But I do think that what you and I are talking about right now is the building of capacity, which is both resilience to tolerate a certain kind of stress, but also just reps. You just get your reps in. You just get more and more comfortable. I no longer tend to get tachycardic when I go into a presentation, with some exceptions, of course. But I know it's going to be over pretty soon. Mm-hmm. I can tolerate it for that amount of time. You get your reps in, it just becomes a little easier.
Well, and for all the people who've had all the anxiety of presentations that I've had, there is a point. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And what I mean by that, in my world, that's kidney stones and expertise in prevention of that you just get to a point where you're no longer presenting and hoping other people don't know more than you or ask a hard question you can't answer. You're trying to find ways to simplify it so they can understand. Yeah. So if you went in and you were teaching kindergarten, that's a different kind of nerves, right?
That'd be an interesting one.
And that's maybe I'm exaggerating, but
it's true.
And I say that because people build barriers around I'm not a good public speaker, so I shouldn't be in academics. You're missing opportunities here because it's not what what it classically has been or was, right?
Yeah. I think also, this is interesting. I haven't talked a lot about my mom, who was she started out as a teacher, but after I was born, I was a very challenging baby and child. And so she ended up becoming a stay-at-home mom. So I'm sorry about that.
She's I can't even teach this one.
Exactly. And she had 2 more kids. So I've got two younger sisters. But I was aware when I was in high school that my dad was doing the Toastmasters program, which is a program that trains you to do public speaking. So I think
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not something I've ever done, but I think as I moved up in my career, it was very obvious to me that learning to do public speaking was actually something that scares the crap out of most people, and that it's something you have to practice. So it probably helped me to have seen a parent do that and not just, I didn't have an expectation that it was going to be easy right away.
I'm thinking, as you're saying it, I'm thinking about my kids, and I don't think either one of us, my wife, are hey, I want to do public speaking. I do a lot of it, but now sometimes I enjoy it. But the two of them are just naturally, they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't know the material. They're not prepared. But they publicly get on a stage and improvise. It's fascinating. Makes no sense.
Isn't that amazing?
No sense at all to me.
Where did this child come from?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Even the shy one, my son, he put him in front of, they're both models, by the way. You put him in front of a camera. Other than that, they're introverts.
That's amazing.
And so it's so weird.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Introversion and presentation can go together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got you
We've gotten only
Well, I
to
think
age like 20.
These are really important points that and this is really actually the whole point, right? But I want to highlight your path, but this all feeds into it, right? This is what it's really kind of about. But here you are, you've gotten this, I guess, this surgical experience, I'll call it, meaning the anatomy lab and all these great, we're going to throw them all into mentors, but maybe just influences. That's not where you end up, right? So, okay, so we're thinking surgery / maybe OB-GYN, somewhere here and there, right? And something happens.
So I actually never really seriously thought about surgery.
Okay.
And so the second of those 2 shadowing experiences that I mentioned was actually a general internist, and at the time I wasn't sort of like, there's general internal medicine, there's different types of medical doctors, and I could be like that wasn't really in my mind. But the work that he did with the patients that I saw with him that day, and that one that really stood out, like that really hung in my memory. And then, I mean, I feel like med school, there's so much of that, like that process of like again and again figuring out like what content you like, what patients, where you feel like you can help patients, and which people you want to spend your time with, right? Like, so you're going through your rotation, you're having the opportunity to sort of like be an anthropologist and a participant who's exhausted and working really hard, like experiencing all these different fields. And so ultimately in med school, it was clear that really I was an internist. Like, I wasn't a proceduralist, and I'm really not a proceduralist. Like, I'll shave a wart down and freeze it, but you really otherwise don't want a scalpel in my hand. Like, that's not a good thing. I'll IND something occasionally.
I've passed out 3 times, right? But there are certain specialties. I always joke around and say pulmonary, ID, and nephrology are a bunch of people who couldn't decide what specialty they wanted to do, so they just did the one that still get to do everything.
Yeah, where you get to touch everything. Yeah, I mean, general internal medicine. There you go. Yeah.
But your I guess pull or drive was more along the lines of the people you would serve or what you would be doing, not what do I get to learn.
Well, as I thought, I had decided internal medicine. I had another experience in medical school. Of course, in medical school, you get to see a lot of specialists, but I had another opportunity to see in one of the outer boroughs of New York City, a primary care doctor working in her primary care practice with one of her patients. And that experience, again, reinforced the critical nature of this ongoing relationship. And with patients, not that you can't, like in your field, you have ongoing relationships with patients. So that exists in other places. Yeah. What I ultimately really decided was, and I thought about nephrology, I thought about rheumatology, I thought about hemonc as fields that I was interested in.
All long-term relationship fields.
So long-term relationship fields. What I ultimately decided was I liked all of medicine a little too much to decide to focus on one thing. And so I decided that I was going to do the field that would allow me, even though I knew that I would never have the depth that any of my specialty colleagues would have, it would allow me to have a lot of breadth, and then to really leverage the relationship skills to take care of patients. So that was how I chose my field. So I ultimately matched in a primary care track residency.
When you say leverage the relationship skills, did you mean like recognition of your own personal relationship skills, or?
I guess what I really mean is be in a field where that power of relationship is so, I mean, now seems unfair because what I now recognize is how critical that actually is in all fields, including surgical fields. Like, there is a difference when patients feel a great amount of trust for their surgeon and when they don't. Like, it's true everywhere. But from my brain at that point, I was like, this is the place where this is going to be a main component of my work, right? Like, I'm not going to then put my patients to sleep and operate on them. Not that I'd be the one putting them to sleep as a surgeon. Obviously that's the anesthesiologist. So, and I liked everything too much. I was too interested in too many things.
Yeah. So, and there are medicine people who are kind of like generalists, and you'd say the one extreme would be the intensive care unit doctor. My patients are all intubated, and I don't have to talk to anyone. And then there's primary care where
you got to talk to
everybody's talking, and they're not going anywhere, and I'm going to see them again, and they're going to message me later today, and I'll message them back, and then they're going to bring their family in, right? So there's kind of two extremes. They're both medicine, right?
Yeah.
I think, you sometimes you think people fall where they can, or they get pulled to where they probably need or want to be, right? And I feel like that's what, for you, it was kind of all along there was this tug.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, unless you're just not mentioning it, there were, I have to say there must have been some negative primary care experiences. You blank those out. You just
You mean like exposures? I think I probably blanked those. I think that because every field there's negatives in every field. So I think what stood out to me was what differentiated those experiences was how powerful those felt to me at the time. So like anything that didn't seem great, there was a lot of stuff that didn't seem great in every field that I saw.
Yeah.
Cool stuff too.
Because somebody, some people find that one negative thing and that's the reason not to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there were 9 positive things.
Right.
I think about my father-in-law playing golf. He's like, I only remember the good shots. And that's, that's exactly what he's getting at. So, you've pulled out enough good shots. And you're kind of locked in there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other things that happened during medical school that were probably really important in terms of understanding my ultimate career path, which is clinical, general internal medicine, and then medical education and well-being. So 9/11 that day, I was actually supposed to be down right by the World Trade Center doing a public health rotation at one of the public health locations at Duane and Reed Street. And so that morning I had gotten up, my husband and I were in our apartment, the TV was on, and like first plane, they were showing on the news that the first plane had hit the World Trade Center. But it didn't compute in my brain, like maybe I shouldn't like get on the subway and go down there. So, which is very strange. And we didn't have like mass text messaging from the med school being like, no one go to down to lower Manhattan. Just don't do that today.
Even if you did, Verizon was, and all the towers were down.
Anyway, we didn't have cell phones actually yet.
Yeah. I had a cell phone, but it didn't matter
because everything was
down.
Or clogged up, like there wasn't enough bandwidth. My husband, who worked, he had a job as a video producer, also generally worked in the Midtown. Actually, that day was down picking up some like tapes at some like place. Actual tapes.
We're gonna have to define for you guys. No,
yeah, I know. There's these things, and there's like, we'll show you an image. Yeah, pop it up. Yeah. So that day we both left our apartment having seen the first plane hit the World Trade Center, and we both went to our respective places. I got on the subway in the east side to go downtown. He went across town and then got on a subway to go down to pick stuff up. So I got off of the subway 3 blocks from the World Trade Center just as the first tower started to fall. It was so loud that it seemed silent. It's just really hard to describe what that was like. And everything, I'm sure there was a lot of noise, but it was like I couldn't hear. Maybe I had noise injury actually. I think it's because my ears were ringing.
It's got to be fairly common. If you think about all those war movies, you know, when they'll go,
yeah, it was like that.
And then like you see people like moving but silent.
Yes, it was like that. So I got off of the subway. This happened. Second tower fell, and my husband and I couldn't find each other. We both were down there, but we couldn't find each other. Like it was this whole chaos. And I had actually a classmate of mine was with me. We'd both gotten on the subway to go to the same location. And so what happened? So we were in downtown Manhattan. It was like 8 miles, I think, to our apartments and like on the Upper East Side. And like everyone else in the city, we just started walking. Like people taking off their high heels and walking on the streets, like just walking to go home, because what else are you going to do? People trying to get across the bridges to get out of Manhattan. And so I'm quite certain what was definitely an acute stress reaction. So I will tell you, I don't remember all those docussations in the brain with things crisscrossing, like my neuroanatomy. That's what we were supposed to be learning at that time. Mm-hmm. I can promise you I need to look that stuff up anytime I'm thinking about it, because I could not commit anything to memory for like weeks after that. And that was really that was an impossible situation in many ways. That was like, it was terrifying. It was sad. It was, traumatic. And here you are, a student, not actually able to do much to really help people. So we can't, like, as a doctor, one of the ways we can tolerate things sometimes is like jump into helping people. Couldn't really do anything.
You're not in a hospital system, like unless what are you going to do?
Right. So there were these little movements popping up, people trying to like get supplies or help. Like, where are those things going to go? It was all very like, what do you do with that energy? So that was a really, and I would say like my husband and I handled that very differently. He was like very practical, like, we're okay. It's okay. Like, these things happen. We're okay. And I just was like overcome by the whole thing. So that was like a very hard period of time after that, not just for me, but for everybody. And like a classmate of mine, his wife, who was a very good friend of mine and went to another med school in New York City, her father had been in the Pentagon, and like, so I mean, it was just like, it was very pervasive. And I had like I knew about like PTSD and what the diagnostic criteria were, So I had like set myself this like timeline, like basically an alarm. Like, if by this date I can't, it was DSM-4 at the time, right? Yeah. If by this date I don't have it together, like then I'll see a therapist, was kind of like my thinking. And then that month rolled around, I was like, okay, the dust is kind of settled, I can pay attention again. And so I was like, so I didn't seek therapy or anything after that.
Separate from 9/11, all med students do this anyway.
Right.
They take the DSM or
Totally.
at the time, and they try to figure out who they are.
Yeah, no, fine.
Right.
Yeah, and so that experience was a lot of things, right? Like it was very personally hard. It was very hard on like a community level, a national level, a global level. Like it was all those things, but
it's all those things outside. You're in it.
Yes, I'm in it, and experiencing what it's like to have to feel unable to function because of stress for a period of time, feeling uncertain about whether it's okay to get help, feeling like I didn't understand why some people didn't seem to be reacting the way I was reacting, and which made me feel even weaker because some people were like, I'm fine. I was like, what the hell? And then the other thing about it was it really made me think about like when we're in a situation to take care of other people, whether that's patients or students or whomever that is, like what should we do when that kind of thing happens? So I still feel, and I have a ton of compassion for the people who are in charge of us as medical students. I can say a lot of really positive experiences occurred because that's totally true, but there were also a lot of really hard, challenging things about being a medical student that pushed me to places I didn't know I was going to be pushed going in, and also being exposed to like levels of human suffering that I hadn't ever conceptualized before. Like having a young person showing up at a hospital who didn't speak English and clearly had a trauma history and was riddled with lesions in her lungs and no one knew exactly what it was. You don't know that until you do it. Like you can't know that.
You also don't know how you're going to react and what's going to be next after that. And some people run to the fire, other people run away.
And also, like, I think a lot of people, and this is kind of how I handled that when it was going on, is they just think that they have to just handle it alone. You know, like I'm seeing all these tremendously horrible things and I'm just going to like gobble up all this suffering and where does it go? So I think being a medical student, taught me where I wanted to go in many ways, ways positive and not so positive, to get back to your prior question about how I chose my clinical specialty. Yeah.
And, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, there's still that stigma, hopefully a little bit better now, where if you are sharing that or not trying to handle that alone,
I got you.
You're weak, right?
Right.
Doing away with that stigma is really, I'm thinking about a lot of this when you're saying it is like, so my wife's an emergency physician, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I pass out at the sight of blood. So when you say run away and run to, right?
Yeah.
It's about two very different things. And the trauma that she comes home with daily. And then another part of it that you kind of briefly mentioned, and I guess we won't focus too much on, you breeze through, is some of the stresses or difficulties or hazing with nurses. Being a woman in medicine is a whole nother discussion. It's a whole level of interaction to get into. But I was thinking,
I think there was a gender component.
Well, and you're in a highly competitive hospital. They're stacking. And this is, I assume we're close in age. It's better now, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd like to think it is. It's a good question. Yeah. So, that was med school. So
that's a bang.
That's a bang. Yeah. So then after that, I had to decide sort of between a categorical medicine residency and a primary care track residency. And I did ultimately choose the primary care track residency. The funny story in that is one of my favorite mentors from medical school at one point was like, why would you do that? You won't have enough ICU time to be a good general internist if you do primary care track. Which is still a hilariously bad piece of advice because becoming a good ambulatory general internist, the learning curve for that is incredibly long because the scope is so different than most medical fields. Because chest pain could be that or left shoulder. It's just like it's. So actually, that was it's just I love we all have our limits, right? So you got to pick and choose,
you see
right?
What you see, and that person at that time is I see. Closer to death people. So therefore.
And I still really admire this person. I've kept sort of in touch with them occasionally. But it was really funny. So I moved on to residency, which was in Boston. And, I think that was where imposter syndrome hit me really, really hard. So I matched into a program at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And I had read all the numbers about the percent of people who actually match there who apply. And I showed up. And even though I had I'd sort of moved institutions in the hierarchy and everything, I was like, there is no possible way I belong here. I was completely convinced. I spent all of orientation with my heart racing, completely anxious.
A people thing or just the institution before the people?
I think it was institution before the people because honestly, the people were great. The people were wonderful.
I think there's a point here, right? And I try to emphasize this because people just convince themselves that everybody's, and then when you get there, there's always a certain percentage of people, no matter where you go or what you do, who you look at and you say, how did they get it?
I was that person.
I will say it was a mirror. No, but you know what I'm getting at. Everybody just perceives everybody as being this,
Right.
like, no, they're not. They're all faking it, just like the rest of us,
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So we moved to Boston, and I would say, so imposter syndrome hit me super hard. It like hit me very, very hard. So like, I would say the beginning of internship, this is so funny. My first ward rotation, I had this wonderful attending who gave me midpoint feedback, and he's like, you're doing actually, he was the attending who said, I don't feel like I need to go back and talk to your patients about the plan later in the day. So I got this really nice feedback, but he was like, but you keep writing the wrong date on your notes. I have to keep correcting them. And it wasn't like I had the day wrong. I was writing like the wrong year. So I'd write like 7/17/84, like just these weird little, because I was so stressed. The things that didn't really matter, like I didn't have the bandwidth to be mindful of what I was doing at all.
Yeah.
So it was very funny. So he would follow me
everybody
around.
knows what year it is. What does it matter what you write?
100%. So he would like fix that. So then I was like, okay, I better get the date right on my notes, because I was so focused on like trying to be a really good doctor and like not make a fool of myself and like take really good care of patients, that I had like, my cognitive load was like completely, plus I was like a slow doctor. I still tend to run a little late because
But you were saying paper charts, right?
Paper charts, yeah.
I'm sure most of the people watching this will never see a paper chart.
This
But,
is true.
I had paper charts also. It's like you wrote like 2 pages of orders. You didn't actually think. You were just on autopilot writing
for
these
the things you thought you could be on
orders,
autopilot
right?
for. Yeah.
Like, and the date would have been part of that.
Yes,
too, right?
100%.
It's like you wouldn't even think about that
Right.
stuff.
Now you never have to write a date on anything. It's
Right.
there. Yeah.
Right.
So that was funny. But so then, the years going on, I'm going through different rotations. Sleep deprivation is definitely a problem. That's like one of my Achilles heels. I don't do well with sleep deprivation, it turns out, but I didn't sort of know that. So mid-year, I was like, okay, I kind of got this. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'd done our inpatient onc service, which was like that was like medicine on steroids. Like, I was like, okay, I was getting kind of confident. But what I didn't realize was that I was getting kind of confident, but I was also completely just at a precipice of like, I am about to spectacularly burn out. Like, I was just at the edge, like, because I was super...
You using the term at the time probably wasn't cool yet either, right? So,
yeah.
So when you can't describe something and know that it exists there, at that time, were you just thinking, I'm going to stress out? Or was that... Or what
So
were you...
burnout was a term that was used... It was used enough that I knew about it.
Okay.
But I think that... The thing that stands out to me about that experience when I look back is that I was very unself-aware. I think I was so tired and working so hard that I was actually not paying any attention to how I was really doing. So I was like, oh, my job performance is fine. I'm doing great. I've got this now. I can write all the orders. I can do all the things.
Tangible,
I made this one good diagnosis here. So I was very focused on job. What ultimately happened around winter of my intern year, I had a death in my family. Not like a close relative, but I got sort of asked some medical questions and I felt like I couldn't go home. It was like, a little, just pushed me over the edge. Like, I didn't realize how close I'd been to the edge. And that was kind of, so beyond having an episode of burnout, like I really had an episode of depression that started in the middle of my intern year. And it was like, and I think the 9/11 stuff had been like, that was there, there'd been this tendency towards like anxiety and probably like had some small episodes in my past, but they'd never really reached a point where I was like, oh, this is like bad and I need to get some help, which I finally did do when I was an intern.
But you've got, you got to survive and you got to get through these classes. You don't have time to...
Right. Actually, the one story from med school I didn't tell you is that I did actually reach out to see a therapist at one point and they didn't call me back. It was one of the school designated people. So I was like, well, I guess I tried. This is like, you learn by counterexample sometimes. So one thing I learned is that when people say they need help, you better freaking listen to them. It's probably hard for them to ask for help.
Right.
So when they reach out, and maybe especially medical students and doctors, but I think this generalizes to other humans, when they say they need help, they probably needed help a while ago and you should show up for them and you better return your call. Obviously I should also have some grace for that person. I have no idea what was going on in their life. But so being accountable to being responsible and showing up for people, that's really important to me. Not that I sometimes screw up with emails, the volume is high. So if ever someone emails me and I don't answer, please nudge me. It's hard to always live up to our high ideals, but like, so I didn't tell you that part of the story, but so I did finally get some help, as an intern. And that was one of the most important things I ever did. And that was what really, so it was like that happened. And then I was like, why did this happen to me? Does this happen to anybody else? Like, am I the only person who's this weak that this happened to them? And so I was on the night flow rotation, and that was like, the patients were asleep a lot. I was doing the things, but like there was time where I wasn't doing immediate patient care. So I started just doing literature review. I had like giant binders of paper articles I'd printed out, and spreadsheets with like, what instrument did they use to study depression or burnout? And what was the population? And like, I got deep down in a rabbit hole. Like, so I basically sublimated this question about like, is there just something deeply flawed with me? Into like, is that really true? Or like, why did this happen? Or what could have been done to prevent it? And so at that point in my career, I got really, really interested in understanding more about what happens when physicians develop depression or other mental health problems, and how we could develop sort of like a prevention and detection arm. And like, so that was kind of my initial focus, was like around that. And then as a resident, I started like this very ill-conceived research project, this longitudinal research project to study depression symptoms in a cohort of residents that started after me. It was ill-conceived only that I didn't have the right infrastructure to actually run a longitudinal project. And so I was like gathering data through this questionnaire and, learning.
We all think we can just do it by ourselves.
Yeah, learning all these hard lessons about how hard it is to be a researcher. But what I found in the data made me realize like I really wasn't alone. And in fact, there was a really high prevalence over the course of residency of an internal medicine residency of very accomplished people who were really good at their jobs developing depression, and that often came with suicidal ideation. And so while it was an imperfect research study that never made it into any article, just some little posters and things like that, like it taught me a ton about what was actually the problem that was in front of me that was invisible mostly, because most people just show up like they're okay. Yeah.
And this is a time where, you were just perceived as weak or
or you think people are going to perceive you that way. I think what you don't realize is that most of the time, if you say you're not okay, your colleagues who are actually good, caring people usually are going to not judge you, and they're usually going to show up for you in a positive way, usually.
Yeah. Right. No, that's what it is. It's a perception that, number one, they even care. They care to, throw whatever negative thing. No, they're like, they care about themselves.
And they then might actually say like, yeah, that's totally happened to me too. Like, that's what you don't realize when you're a trainee who's like feeling alone with something hard.
Yeah, you were in it. I mean,
yeah.
But this is, I guess, a really good, birthing place for what you do, meaning that you went through it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad luck, good for everyone else, right? Because the people who benefit from this from you.
I always wonder how many like chief wellness officers have this in their past. I think a lot of them probably do, but I mean, so do just a lot of doctors, to be honest. Like, it's very prevalent. It's just the question is, what do you do with it?
Right.
And I think I think many of us are, we're sublimators. We like to turn something bad into something productive. And this was that project for me.
But looking at your past and how you got here, and, from things of like ballet and helping, you were kind of primed for it before it happened, that you would react that way because that's who you were, right? And then other people, it happens and, they don't react that way. But maybe it wasn't who they were.
Okay,
and that's okay too. Yeah.
Get what they need and are okay. Ultimately, that's the important thing.
So we kind of know where the interest came from, right? And then how did you translate this to the bigger
that's a more,
project?
Yeah, that's the story that, so like, medical training is so funny because, you're like, I do this and then I do this and then I do this and then I like, it's very spelled out for you, or like, not all that it's always easy, or like I get a K award and then I get, like we feel like there are these paths. So like, but not all things have a clear path. And oftentimes those are very valid things to do. And I would say this falls into that category. After residency, and to be like really frank, I think that experience that I had as an intern, like really did leave me feeling vulnerable and fearful. So I was like very cautious about what I was going to do next. Like it did make me feel like maybe I should be careful about, all these things. So I finished residency. I did a good job in residency. I was a good doctor. Like all that was true. So I decided after that to do a general medicine fellowship because I was like, maybe I'll try out being a researcher because like starting to study this and learn about this has been really meaningful for me. And I was like, so I did a general medicine fellowship. I was like, I like this, but I also like other things like taking care of patients and teaching. So as a general medicine fellow, I was lucky in that I had a mentor who, well, the purpose of that fellowship was really to develop researchers who would go on to get R01s and like do health services research, et cetera, et cetera. And that turned out not to be my path. A job opened up in the residency to lead this curriculum called the humanistic curriculum. And I decided I was like, I'd like to apply for that job as a fellow. I applied for the director job and I got it. And he was like, it was great to have a mentor who, even though I was there to learn research skills, he saw that this was really important to me and aligned with some things that I cared about deeply. And so he like had to like kind of advocate at the department that I was doing my fellowship in that would be okay. And so that was another example of like a mentor who was able to see outside of the box and think about the person in front of them. And, you know, so I did some research, but I took this role. And so that really like got me into this pathway because I was still thinking about like from an education perspective, 9/11, med school response to 9/11, resident develops depression, like, you know, like how do I make sense of all this and how do I start turning it into something? And then so this teaching experience, which situated me like really in that sort of like doctor-patient communication, like working on challenging things in medicine, that kind of like whole humanistic thread of medicine that had really drawn me in. So that sort of drew me back into the medical education space. And so I did that alongside my Gen Med fellowship and then chose to stay in faculty practicing in the large multi-specialty group practice where I'd had my primary care clinic. And then I kept teaching at the residency and took on some teaching roles at the med school, kind of in an aligned area. And so then I sort of fashioned myself like, okay, I'm a medical educator who thinks about well-being and thinks about all these human skills kind of things. And so we were in Boston for 3 more years after I finished those 2 training programs. And then we'd had our first baby during my Gen Med fellowship, which was amazing. But man, public school is super complicated in Boston. And man, being a primary care doctor in Boston is not super lucrative relative to the cost of living. And man, we were really far away from family. So if anything happened, if anyone got sick, we had no help. And so I started looking around and applied for a job here at UW and just like, again, lucky to be connected with people who see you, you know, and like, so when I came out and applied for a GIM job, the division head, Betsy Trowbridge, was like, you know, you need like a role with the residency. And so they created an APD role for me, which was like, you know, my foot in the door of getting to do that work for more of my time. And so then I really thought about curriculum development and all that kind of stuff. And it allowed me to keep like building in the well-being space.
And a lot of this is education, presentations, that presence and the whole introvert thing, right? Mm-hmm. Is that like just washed over at this point because not an option or just faking it when you have to?
You know, it's so funny because like the faking it part for me as an introvert. So like, I'm probably not like on the most introverted end of the scale, but I'm in that end of the scale. I really like one-on-one interactions generally don't exhaust me very much. So like all the mentoring with residents, teaching, all that, you know, was okay. Yeah. And frankly, like presenting in front of a large group, you don't have to make small talk with them. So it's also okay.
It's also, you can dissociate it into 1-to-1, right?
Right,
yeah,
like afterwards you can then answer one-on-one questions or whatever. So no, that was, well, and it also was just that I felt really strongly about what I was doing. So when I came here, it was really helpful. So when I came here, there was really a burning platform around communication skills training, which was something I cared about and liked and was willing to do. But the residency director at that time was like, this is Wisconsin. We really don't have a well-being problem here. Like that's, this isn't East Coast. Like we have problems. And I was like, I bet if I show you the data, that's not true. And so I started like, doing some validated assessments of our own residents and was like, yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing, buddy. So what I did was I really combined the sort of like communication skills training with sort of like well-being skills and thinking around like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, like supporting your colleagues, building community kind of stuff together, sort of like as a little tactic to kind of like tag it in because it fits there anyway. Okay.
It's a good point, the regional thing that you just mentioned, because people perceive like, oh, in New York City is so crazy and so there and the well-being is, no, this could be anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. Definitely anywhere.
And this is where I kind of really wanted to get you. It's like, so here into doing wellness and really like helping. It seems like you have that natural need to help people, help patients, right? But also help other people that you see around you that aren't, doing well or not
or to try to have them not do well. If we're to try to have them not do well.
Right.
That too.
Preventative.
Right. That kind of like public health approach to well-being, right? Yeah. Like shift the curve. So then it's interesting. Like, so there's depression, anxiety, other mental health problems, and then there's burnout. And those really are distinct things. They can they can coexist. They can increase vulnerability for the other thing, but they are really distinct syndromes. And so when I, over time, sort of like kept taking as many opportunities as I could to work in the well-being space, and then my current role became available, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to get a chance. I can't, I'm not in charge of very much stuff, right? But I can help people see how we can build things out in a better way to help prevent some of these things, right? And so that's the exciting piece. So I get to do like so many things that I love doing.
And I think it's a key point is because most of us, or people who are pursuing medicine, they're, I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to treat patients, and this, that, and the other. And then you get into kind of environments. I ended up doing all kinds of weird leadership positions, and a large part of that was I may not like the way this is going. I can either, it doesn't bother me, keep going on. I can do research to try to show why this is wrong, or I can take a leadership or management position, and then I can just make changes and try things just kind of all at once. And that empowerment of it, it's really important, but it's not something that I guess we gear our, future physicians for, or explain to them, the strength that they can get from that and that pathway. And I think that's what's really important to point out. Like, this is how, you saw, hey, this is how I can make the biggest influence. You find it rewarding, I assume, because I know we do. Your existence does for us.
Very kind. Yeah, I find it super rewarding. And it's not like, I don't want to make it sound too simple. Like, it's not like you get a leadership role and suddenly you can magically fix a whole bunch of things. Like, that is never true. There's a million counterbalancing things. There's so many competing demands. And so, like, a lot of it is really trying to just keep just nudging in the right direction and trying to advocate and influence where you can. And I think the other thing is, as physicians, we get the idea that we have to do everything and we are the best people to do everything. And no, we have teams for a reason. In our clinical environments, we have nurses who do incredibly important work with whom which our patients wouldn't do well and we wouldn't succeed. And in the, as just an example. And in the leadership space, we have
administrators that manage people. This is what they do.
Yes. And so working in partnership with them and kind of understanding where you can fit in, where to push, where to let go. It's a constant dance, and it's not always obvious what to do, and tons of missteps along the way, just hopefully getting better at it over time. Hopefully knowing when the friction has been reduced in an area and you can make progress, then you take that, chance favors the prepared mind. Is that how that goes? Right? Something like that. Yeah. Just developing a lot of awareness of where you can make progress in one area and knowing where to pick your battles. And I don't know. It's a journey.
At the core of it is, you find something you like and you pursue it, and then all the other pieces and obstacles, like you said, just because you're a leader, you can't just do everything, right?
No.
But if you cared about it, then you're willing to have that fight.
Yeah.
And, those little steps backwards and forwards and all that other stuff, because you actually care about it. If not, you'll just get frustrated.
Yeah, that's always an option too, right?
And I really just want people to see that these alternative, pathways, but also, these reoccurring themes of it's not smooth, it's not easy, people are going through struggles. You have someone, and I'm just going to embarrass you a little bit, but you have someone here who's walked through the highest ranks in the most elite programs, and this is a little bit of insight into what you were actually going through, right? Because people can just look through the CV and start checking off Cornell and Harvard, and it's like, everything was easy for that person. All through high school, they were probably whatever, and here you are. I know you're not the person to put that out there, so that's why I'm doing that for you. But the point is that even the people in those highest apex, environments, they still have doubts, they still have struggles, they still have feelings, they still have depression, they still have
any of the things that can befall humans.
And need help to overcome. It takes, a group, a village, or whatever you want to say.
And the one last thing I'll add to that is that doesn't go away as people get more advanced in their career, right? So, you're a student, you're attending, or a mentor. They're also a human who has their own life and their own stuff, and everyone is always trying to balance a million things and trying to withstand, certain parts of it get easier, right? You don't have to look things up quite as much or whatever. Yes, expertise helps with some things, but life is still life, and humans are still humans. So showing up for each other that way and all being kind to one another and having grace for each other is also really, really important. It's one of the things that makes us work better together, show up for our patients, and be okay at the end of the day. So, yeah.
It's a pleasure.
you.